You got that?
Yeah.
What a crowd. Like, sold out on a weekday night in July. This is extraordinary. You do know that this is not the Justin Timberlake concert, right? But what I do think that this crowd, where we've just had to assemble overflow seats again on a weekday night in July, is a testament to the engagement of Lexingtonians, the sense we have amongst ourselves about the extraordinary community that we call home, and the high level of engagement that comes with what it means to be a citizen here. And I will say this as an editorial comment and as a proud supporter of the Fayette Alliance. I don't know any other organization in this community that is at the meeting point of civic engagement and engaging people around that which makes us unique, both culturally and geographically. This is a collecting point for people who care passionately about this community, and we are flattered by the opportunity to come tonight, not to give you a commercial about our company, but to talk to you about the geopolitical and macroeconomic trends that are impacting where we live, how we live, and what the future will look like. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not overstating anything. It is not hyperbolic to say that we have entered the solar age. The way we power our homes, the way we power our lives, the use of renewable energy to do so, will dictate how we live, where we live, and how prosperous we live for at least the next 50 years. The electrification of everything will be the primary economic driver in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the city of Lexington, the nation of the United States, and globally for at least the next 50 years. This is the biggest economic and technological transition since the advent of the internet. And the question for people who care about the places they live, who care about their country, who care about the world, is are we going to choose to tack our sails in the direction of this incredible, epic defining moment, or are we going to be run over by them? And let me give you a couple key examples. And Kentucky is really a key example at a very small level of what's happening with these forces moving around us. First, ladies and gentlemen, this shouldn't be a statement of political courage. It is a fact. Climate change is real. Climate change is real, and it is impacting every facet of our lives. And let me remind you that tornadoes in Kentucky in December are not the norm. That flash flooding in Appalachia in July is not the norm. And while these may not be directly attributable to climate change, what we all know is that the severity of weather and the severity of climate change is going to be a defining moment, a defining characteristic of the time and place we live in. And while this has become politically controversial for the over 60 crowd, this is settled matter with those under 40. Republican under 40 believe in climate change almost to the same extent that do Democrats. And it's because we raised children in our public schools for the last 25 years under the notion of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And they came out caring about the environment. And while they are not the dominant political force that they will become, they're already dominating market behavior. This is the millennials and the generation behind them are the largest generation in American history. They're far bigger than the boomers. And when it comes to climate action, they are not messing around. And you see it in the fact that the vast majority of the Fortune 500, from Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, Anheuser-Busch, Toyota, Ford, General Motors, Walmart, even British Petroleum is now telling people that BP stands for Beyond Petroleum. These companies aren't just doing this because it's the right thing to do, though I do like to believe that there are a number of shareholders and business leaders on this planet who understand that there's no use to doing business on a planet that is on fire. But they're doing it as a response to this now dominant market force. And so whether it's the fact that the Toyota Camry, which has been the #1 selling sedan on the planet for the last as long as I've been alive, will only be available on an EV version or a hybrid version in a couple of years. They're not doing it because they're ideologues. They're not doing it because they're dumb. They're doing it because they know what their audience is. And so for policymakers, for business leaders, for citizen activists, we've got to decide, are we going to make the same decisions that the private sector has made in embracing the reality that climate change is here, and that as a value statement, you better play a role in having done something about it. 2 data points. When President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Accords, the business community shrugged and said, no, we're good. The other is that more coal burning plants closed under 4 years of Donald Trump than did under 8 years of Barack Obama. This is a market force, folks. It is utterly irresistible. And so, as a person who had a good career in politics, who cared a lot about policy, I began to think about, in Kentucky, our conversation needs to be less about who's next and more about what's next. And at the same time, we're experiencing these climate disasters in far western Kentucky with a tornado, and far eastern Kentucky with a 500-year flood. We're also out cutting ribbons on multi-billion-dollar battery factories that are here because they know that Kentucky is the 3rd largest automotive manufacturer in the United States, has a role to play in building the vehicles of the future, and they will be electric. And so we've got to choose whether we're going to be relevant to this or not. And so I founded a company called Edelen Renewables, incredibly creative in the titling, I'm aware. But what we lack in creativity and how we branded ourselves, we have captured in creativity in terms of our mission. Because what separates us from any other renewable energy developer in the country is not just the fact that we're the only one in Kentucky, which is why I put the big sign on Main Street, by the way. Wanted people to know we're here. Our mission is to bring the promise of renewable energy to the forgotten places of America. That is who we are, and it's what we do. It began as a vision for me, having been a former elected official and statewide office holder, seeing the eastern Kentucky hollowing out because we didn't have a vision for what beyond coal looked like. We didn't have a vision for how are we going to make the people who literally powered the industrial development of America for 100 years. How are we going to make them relevant to the opportunities of the new economy, a newer, greener, more sustainable economy? And all we candidly offered these folks was political rhetoric, that if you vote for a different guy, he'll bring the jobs back. And that didn't happen because the economy has shifted. And what frustrated to me to my core is I grew up on the other end of the state. My family has grew tobacco in Kentucky for nearly 200 years when we decided to quit. And we decided to quit because elected officials had the courage to tell tobacco farmers, of which there were 80,000 tobacco farm families at our peak, that the future was going to have to be different, that we're going to have to diversify. And you may remember there was a massive legal settlement with the tobacco companies, billions of dollars with folks like R.J. Reynolds, and we took a big portion of those proceeds and we invested them in farmers and we helped them diversify. My family paid off debt, bought new equipment, more land, and diversified our program. And today, folks, farm gate receipts are double what they were just 20 years ago, because we had the courage to drive change. We didn't do that in the coal fields, and that drove me crazy because, again, these people in our mountains powered the industrial development of America. They provided the material and manpower that won 2 world wars. They ought not to be left behind. But we've got to have a vision for what that future looks like. And so we began 7 years ago on the notion to coal to solar. There are 1 million acres of unreclaimed and reclaimed mountaintop removal sites in central Appalachia. And while we can have a political debate about the practice of mountaintop removal, I think what is clear is this is an opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons. These are vast, flat spaces where you don't impact anybody's view shed, where there aren't neighbors to offend, where there aren't property values to harm. These are places where people failed to realize that it takes an enormous amount of power to power a coal mine. So what you see in Appalachia with the transmission and distribution infrastructure is the equivalent of that 10-lane highway that runs through downtown Atlanta. So what our idea was, since the infrastructure's still there, but there's no power on it going anywhere either way because the economy's disappeared, Why can't we use that infrastructure to carry the electrons that we create on that site and to take it to where people live? It only took me 7 years, ladies and gentlemen, to become an overnight success. The only people who had more patience than my bankers was my wife, and I promised her that this was going to work. And if we can go to the third slide, please, I want to show you what a 7-year overnight success looks like. This is Martin County, Kentucky. It is under construction now. This is half the site. We worked for 7 years to pull this off. A great little company you've never heard of called Toyota stepped in to buy the power. And we worked for 3 years to create a workforce and economic development strategy that maximized local employment. So there were hiring preferences for out-of-work miners and others who lost employment thanks to the disappearance of the coal economy. And we are putting them in a job where they can earn a portable and stackable skills credential at my expense rather than their own. And in doing so, become relevant to the opportunities of a newer, greener economy. By the way, I love this. Gosh, I love this. I shouldn't take so much pride in saying it, but I can't help it. This is also the largest taxpayer in Martin County and will be for at least the next 30 years. This is what the future looks like if you've got the courage to create it. This is what the future looks like if you've got the courage to bring people together to do big, important things. And I think this is especially important because all of us know we're living in an age where we're told we can't get beyond our divisions, that there's no way to bring people together. Folks, that is the argument of weak leaders. My partner in this deal is a coal company. You can imagine that they don't vote for the same people I do. You can sure imagine they didn't vote for me. After this, they would. But it's a huge deal. Balance sheet financed by a company owned by Shell. Toyota bought the power. This is an extraordinary monument. This is $231 million in private capital investment in one of the poorest counties in the United States. I'm about to do this again next year in Perry County. The year after that, we'll do it in Perry, Knott, and Breathitt County. And for the next decade, we'll be building all across this country. Edelen Renewables is now in 13 states. And what makes us unique is that we focus on working on projects that leave legacy, economic, and social impact in the communities where we develop. We call that social impact solar, and we've trademarked it. There is a hunger in this country for people who want to do big, important things. And now we have some tools that are incredibly vital to that. The Inflation Reduction Act took the value of my company and it added a zero to the back of its net worth. We will now be the global leader as a country in meeting the climate challenge and seizing these economic opportunities. The infrastructure bill will just hasten this. We're going to do what the Chinese can't do and what the Europeans won't do. We are going to completely decarbonize our economy by 2050. It is happening not just because we've made the investment, not just because you've got a robust development community that's wanting to do this, not just because you've got the near entirety of the Fortune 500 who've put their shoulder to the wheel to get it done. It's going to happen because young people are exerting their influence in our political and economic affairs more and more every day, and this is the future they want, and it's what it's going to look like. So our job is to keep it together, to be that bridge. And so what does this mean? What does this mean for this local community? What does it mean for those of us who love the bluegrass? What does it mean for those of us who want to square the deal between a Lexington founded on its incredible natural beauty, but its progressive spirit and confidence in what the future should look like? Don't let people tell you we can't bring people together. You can't. It's just extraordinarily hard. It's extraordinarily difficult. But it can be done. And while this is a great example of that, I think the more profound and long-term relationship and leadership initiative that we've undertook is farmers powering communities. And so in every community in America that has a rural character, there is this fight between those who want to develop large-scale renewable energy projects and those who want to preserve the rural character of their community. And what's happened for the last several years is that because we haven't had leaders who were able to get folks together, we've been sort of at loggerheads, and everybody's given up. And projects either get passed through planning and zoning by approaches that roll over local opposition, or they don't happen. But folks, we got to get away from the zero-sum game culture. We have got to get in the business of creating win-wins. And so, as every great initiative begins with, the Farmers Powering Community Initiative began with two friends, me and a guy named Billy Van Pelt. Billy, say hello to everybody, please. So Billy has been with the American Farmland Trust and in the preservation space in Lexington forever. He was one of the chief architects and advocates of our Purchase of Development Rights program that has fundamentally preserved Lexington's position for generations to come into perpetuity. And it just occurred to us over lunch. I know this is going to be way too common sense for the era that we're living in, but I leaned to Billy and I said, Billy, don't you think we ought to have the people working to feed the planet and those working to save it on the same page? As you heard me mention earlier, I'm a farm kid. I'm from Meade County, Kentucky. My dad still farms. If you paid attention to my governor's race, my father was featured as prominently in my ads as I was for a very good reason. He's a common sense guy. And so I went to Dad 10 years ago. I said, Dad, do you believe in climate change? He said, hell yes, son. Every farmer believes in climate change. I am planting and harvesting in dramatically different months than when I began doing this 50 years ago. And so it's about finding common ground. Farmers don't want to see the planet burn up. Farmers are the most dramatically impacted by climate change. But how can we bring people together? How can we do a different approach to this that fundamentally makes sense? And so out of that conversation, it took us about a year, we formed Farmers Powering Communities, which is a national initiative. We already have 20 megawatts in the development queue. We're working all across the country. We're going to bring reasonable solar development to rural communities in a way that preserves that landscape. And we're going to enrich farmers. And we're going to save the planet. Pretty cool, right? Let's watch this video. It can be done, folks. Leadership is just really hard. And the thing I would point out to you is my favorite speech given by an American politician was President Kennedy at Rice. And it was the "We Choose the Moon" speech, right? He said, we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think that's where we've got to be. We've got to acknowledge that there are real divides in our society, that there are real ideological differences of opinion, but people of goodwill can come together and bridge those deltas. And you can do it in a meaningful way. And the reason why we need to do this right now is that we're living in the greatest confluence of economic, technological, and cultural change in the history of any of our lifetime. And so knowing that we've got this opportunity to decarbonize our work, to decarbonize our economy, to electrify the planet, and that this is going to be the primary driver of economic growth, we have to understand that this is one of those rare moments, particularly for one of those places like Kentucky where we tend to fall behind. This is one of those rare moments where we can catapult into the future. We can train people from different backgrounds to take these jobs. We can use the green energy economy to diversify the winner's circle and to right historic wrongs. That's why we're not only working in Appalachia, but I will tell you something that I learned. On January 2nd of 2022, my company and I were profiled on the front page of the Sunday New York Times. And what I learned there about the work we're doing here, what I learned is that there's a reason, Daryl, that lawyers advertise, and it's because it works. And so our little firm in Kentucky started to blow up. And as a result, we saw that moment for what it was, and we began to think about other opportunities to bring a social impact solar approach to other places in this country. And now I'm pleased to report that we're working with tribal communities in the American West, literally indigenous people who were the victims of the Industrial Revolution, were completely bypassed by the digital revolution because they didn't have connectivity, that we can put smack dab in the middle of the green energy revolution, training these good folks to have an opportunity in a 21st century economy while creating a long-term revenue stream for their tribes in Pueblo. We're doing a major initiative in the Deeper South that we will announce later on this year, where we're going to work with minority farmers and minority communities in the Deep South, where 200 years of systemic racism has resulted in the worst economic indicators you could imagine. Let me share this with you. In the state of Georgia, the average white farmer nets about $70,000 a year. Nets. An African-American farmer, the average African-American farmer on a property half the size, nets about $8,000 a year. In Alabama, for a white farmer, it's $40-some thousand a year. For a black farmer, it's less than $1,000. That's because you've had 2 centuries of systemic racism and sharecroppers not able to buy land. And once they could buy land, it was marginal at best. Totally neglected and discriminated against by the United States Department of Agriculture and the Rural Service Administration. They won a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit several years ago, but that doesn't change things long-term. What changes things long-term is 40 years of revenue produced through a land lease. That changes the game dramatically. We take people who have been neglected and left behind and turn them into millionaires overnight using the power of the green energy economy. What I'm so excited about our little company, which isn't so little anymore, but compared to our peers we are, is that we are totally aware of this moment, and we're leveraging this incredible confluence, again, of economic, technological, and cultural change to leave communities better as a result for us being there. And we're super excited to do it, and we're incredibly excited to be in this fabulous community. It would be easier, trust me, y'all. Lexington, Kentucky is not the easiest place to run a national renewable energy firm, but we're changing that because we love Lexington. Kentucky is probably the worst place to do a green energy project because our leaders never contemplated anything other than a fossil fuel economy. We're here because we are making our mark, and we intend to knock a hole in the wall big enough for others to follow. The Fayette Alliance has been terrific. We're aligned in so much, and we're so grateful, Brittany, for this opportunity. I've got 3 minutes left in my remarks, and we'll just move that to Q&A. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Check our website out, Edelen Renewables. And if you're downtown, just step in on us sometime. We're around.